Hello and welcome back to F1 Analyzes. This is the third episode now. That sounds kind of crazy to say. And today I have a very lovely guest, Amber Kostick.
Hi.
Today we're going to be talking about Aston Martin. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to go over a few questions just as like a get to know you type thing. How long have you been watching F1 for?
I want to say 3 months. It's literally just because you are interested in it, and
that was the next question is how'd you get into F1?
Oh, I wonder how.
I wonder.
Yeah, but it's because you were sending me TikToks. I was like, well, that's kind of fire, dude. Whoa.
It is fire.
It actually is.
So who is your favorite team?
Aston Martin.
Yes, you can see I have a theme here of getting people to do their favorite teams for episodes. Who is your favorite driver?
So it's been changing around a lot recently just because I'm indecisive. Right now, I love George Russell. I don't know what it is.
Okay,
just
yes.
Hey girl, you got it.
He's great. I love him. Every single thing I see about him makes me laugh.
Did anyone have report in rain? I think it's sweat from the inside of my helmet.
He's got such a dry sense of humor.
He's just not real.
No, he isn't. He's a figment of my imagination.
Yeah, he doesn't feel like a real person. Who was it before him?
It was that Stroll for a second there. I have personal beef with him now. We're beefing. Oh. The girls are fighting.
Okay. Yeah. You guys have talked?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay. Who is your least favorite team?
Okay, so that...
What was that reaction?
I'm a big hater.
I know.
So there's quite a few, but I'd have to say probably Alpine or Haas right now.
Okay,
or Visa Cash App Red Bull because of the name.
Visa Red Bull Cash App.
Oh! It's so important to me that I remember that.
Who is your least favorite driver?
Yuki Tsunoda.
Okay.
Or Magnussen.
So why don't you like Yuki and Kevin?
I think...
I like calling him Kevin.
I just think aggressive driving to the point where it affects others negatively, and being as it is such a dangerous sport and you are putting your life on the line, the fact that people can have such an aggressive driving style because if you're not even winning, girl, that's embarrassing.
So you like Max Verstappen?
I like him as a person. I do not like his driving style.
Okay, I was gonna ask okay. He is a bit of an aggressive driver.
Yes.
On track. So that is a good intro to some of your opinions, some of how this episode is gonna go.
Oh, I'm opinionated.
So today we're gonna be talking about Aston Martin. They joined F1 in 1959.
Damn.
Yes, very long time ago. So I say that they're a recent team, but really their start goes all the way back to 1959. They raced for 2 seasons, the 1959 season and the 1960 season, and they scored 0 points. And then they left the sport.
Honestly, if you don't succeed, it's okay to quit.
So that's when they joined F1. And then in 1991... there was the Jordan team.
Yes.
And the Jordan team is basically the first fundamentals of what's now become modern-day Aston Martin. Jordan was a team from 1991 until 2005. There were a ton of people that drove for them that were big names, like Michael Schumacher, who we talked about last episode, former world champion Damon Hill, and Martin Brundle drove for them as well. Do you know who Damon Hill and Martin Brundle are?
No, personally, I like to mind my business. I'm so sorry. If I get too into something, I will not stop talking about it for at least 4 months. So
Girl, what do you think I'm doing?
No, I'm living vicariously through you because if I get too into it, I'm not getting out.
You're the reason that I started this podcast.
Really?
We've talked about this.
Oh my god, yeah, but I kind of forgot until just now.
You started to ask questions and be more interested in F1, so I started to post videos on TikTok for you to be able to understand things more. And you were pretty receptive to them, and you enjoyed it, and then you would ask more questions.
Oh, yeah.
And I just sort of thought maybe other people who were getting into it, it could be beneficial to them as well. The Jordan team, out of the 250 races that they entered, they only won 4.
Better than 1959 and 1960.
That's true. So they're improving.
Exactly.
Who is Damon Hill?
Life is very scary if we think of all the things that can happen, but it is not just that. It's not one thing or another. It all balances out, and eventually in some curious way.
So Damon Hill won the World Championship with Williams in 1996. And he's the son of Graham Hill, who also won a championship. Damon Hill started racing with motorbikes. He entered F1 when he was 31. Older than most F1 drivers.
Yeah.
But he still went on to beat a bunch of people and win. He has nothing to do with Aston Martin, except for being a part of the Jordan team once. I just wanted to talk about him.
Just one time. I mean, if he's a sick dude, why not?
Exactly. And then the other is, who's Martin Brundle?
There he is. Mark, over to you.
Well, busy grid as always.
I love Martin Brundle. Martin Brundle is an inspiration of mine, truly.
Okay.
He is a former F1 driver who drove from 1984 until 1987, and he now works for Sky Sports. Sky Sports, please hire me. Thank you. And is one of the commentators that airs on like ESPN along with David Crofty.
Is that? So I do know who that is then.
You do?
I think so. I'd recognize his face. Probably.
He often does like alongside track things during practices or qualifying, but he's typically with Crofty for the actual races. You would probably recognize his voice, honestly.
Right, where are we? We're on the grid. How are we doing?
Yeah, but he's one of the people who just like microphone in face to some of the drivers after qualifying, right?
Let's keep mooching forward and see who else we can find down here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I think I'd recognize some of that.
Does do that sometimes. Yay. It rotates. He's like one of the rotating commentators that does that for Sky Sports.
Is that why you love him, or is it because of his time?
No, his commentating is why I love him.
Okay.
I'm sure he was a great racer. I don't know too much about his actual racing career as much as I know about his commentating now, because I hear him like every race. From the Jordan team, it then morphed into the Force India team because it was bought by this guy. Oh. There's no way it's Vijay. It's got to be VJ.
That's worse. Okay, so
it's Vijay Mallya.
You're not even kidding.
I'm not kidding.
I cannot.
VJ Mallya.
In 2009 is when Force India became a team. From 2009 until 2019. Owner, Vijay Mallya, was accused of fraud, money laundering, and defaulting on loans.
Good for him, I guess. Scam the government.
No.
Okay.
In 2017.
And he was still the owner 2 years after that?
Because what happened was he then was no longer able to run the team because of the lack of money, right? I think in 2017. He wasn't allowed to leave the UK because I think India wanted to arrest him.
Oh.
So he was kind of hiding out in the UK a little bit. And then they sent out a warrant for him. And then he was on trial in the UK. They eventually arrested him in 2017 after that warrant was put out. And then in 2022, he was sentenced to 4 months in jail due to contempt of court from a case in 2017 where he was transferring money to his children, even though he was ordered not to do that by the court.
Okay.
So very interesting guy that just happened to own an F1 team for a little bit.
I feel like only really crazy people or like really just weird people own F1 teams.
There is so much weird shit that happens in F1 beyond just like normal sport drama.
It's almost like sport politics.
Oh, yes, absolutely. It's sport politics, 100%.
That's awful. Okay.
But it goes like a step further than that. It's not just sport politics. It's like literal crimes. I just find it really interesting, the kinds of things that happen within F1 like that.
Well, wasn't the current F1 like FIA president like accused of tampering with a race last year?
Yes, he was. Yeah.
Can you tell me a little more about that?
So the current head of the FIA or the current head of F1 FIA is Mohammed Ben Sulayem.
Yeah.
And he basically, there was a situation last race where Fernando Alonso got a penalty, and then it was overturned by the stewards. And since then, it's then come out that potentially Mohammed has kind of put pressure on the stewards to make that overturn, which is not allowed. So the question is, one, why?
Yeah.
And two, if that's true or not. I haven't done too much research into it.
Do you think it'd have something to do with, like, what we were talking about before with, like, the, political sport aspect, or do you think it'd be more of just a favoritism thing? Out of your personal opinion. Obviously, you can't speak to his thoughts.
Right. It's interesting, too, because this year Fernando Alonso has had, like, a meeting with the FIA to talk about potential bias towards people who aren't European in the sport, particularly towards, like, Spaniards in the sport.
Okay.
So then the question is, why would he have overturned it if there is this bias towards them? Like, as in, but when I say bias towards them, I mean, like, a negative bias towards them.
Yeah.
So the question is, why would he overturn it if that's the case? But also, why would he overturn it at all? Like, I just don't...
Just what's the reason?
No, I wish I had more insight into that, but unfortunately I'm across the sea. And after Force India, it became Racing Point. And it was because a large portion of Force India was bought by Lawrence Stroll. Lawrence Stroll is a Canadian billionaire, and he then rebranded it to be called Racing Point. And the drivers for that were Sergio Perez and Lance Stroll. So Perez gave them their only win during the 2020 Sakir Grand Prix.
He drives for...
Sergio Perez?
Yeah,
Right now, Sergio Perez, he has a fun little nickname. His nickname is Checo.
Pretty happy in general the way I see and feel the sport. You know, I have a vision of it, and I'm happy the way I see it.
He started in F1 in 2011 at the age of 21, and he was in the Ferrari Driver Academy for a while. And he's driven for Sauber, McLaren, Force India, Racing Point, and is now at Red Bull.
Do you think that's a beneficial move for him that he went to Red Bull?
Racing Point rebranded to be Aston Martin. Sebastian Vettel then came in and basically kicked Checo out of his seat. So then Checo went to Red Bull.
Yes. Okay.
Which, yes, I do think that was a good move for him in his career, because before that, I don't think he was super well known. I think he was sort of just like pushed aside, and he still sort of is pushed aside because he's racing alongside Max Verstappen. So he gets a lot of hate because he's racing with this like super great driver. And it's not that he's not a great driver as well. It's just Max is really on top of it.
Yeah.
So I think he gets a lot of unnecessary hate. I'm a big defender of Sergio Perez. I like him, and I think he gets a bad rep, and I think he deserves more credit.
I think he's a good addition to the Red Bull team, personally. I think he's very good as a support for Max.
Yeah.
As well as I think he himself is a good driver. I don't think
agree.
he's, like, especially negative. Like, all these people have kind of painted it to be.
Yeah, I don't know why he gets this, like, reputation
understand.
of being negative. He's a good driver.
Yeah.
He also has done super well at Red Bull with Max.
Yes.
He got second in the Drivers' Championship. He's not doing super, super well right now, but neither is Red Bull as a whole. Perez has 6 Grand Prix wins and 39 podiums.
I think that's the most important thing. He has consistency. Right now, I think it's hard on him, but he's also been doing this for however many years. He's been doing this for 10 plus years.
If Carlos does not end up at Red Bull, I would like Perez to stay there.
Absolutely, I agree.
I don't think that they should have anyone else. We have all these other team names for what Aston Martin is now.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, why is it now called Aston Martin? In 2021, Lawrence Stroll bought 16.7% stake in Aston Martin, so he rebranded the team.
People with money scare me. Okay, so one day he was just like, just buy a lot stock. And now it's Aston Martin. Like, that's crazy. That's absurd to me.
I mean, it's just interesting what branding does, you know? It's like
Exactly.
where people's loyalties lie when they, like, put stock into something to then have to change around a whole team to represent that, to be better in partnership. It's just a kind of interesting dynamic sometimes.
I can absolutely appreciate the fact that he wanted to do a rebrand. Sometimes I feel as if some of the teams, like Alfa Romeo to kick Sauber, they do it poorly.
Yeah, what is that? Say what you want about Lawrence Stroll. Him and his team did a great job rebranding Aston Martin.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Alfa Romeo was a good team name, and they had a fire color car.
And now
it's light neon green.
Stop rebranding what is not broken. If it's a funding issue, that's a completely different thing. Ferrari just got
HP.
bright blue on a red car. There is a white HP logo.
I don't know. But the Aston Martin rebrand was very well done.
Yes, I agree.
It just was a smooth transition, I think.
And
or at least from the outside it was.
Yes. And considering Lance Stroll was driving for the team prior, and bringing in such, like, a well-loved driver like Fernando Alonso.
And even before that, they brought in Sebastian Vettel.
You have a special place in your heart for that period of time.
For a period of time?
That period of time?
Oh, that period of time. I thought you meant, like, I only have had a special place in my heart for him for a period of time. I was like,
no, you've had a special place in your heart for Sebastian Vettel for many moons. Many moons.
He's a great driver and a great person. That's all I
say. Less. Like,
I'm gonna be talking. No. I'm gonna be talking about him in the Red Bull episode as well.
Yeah. Well, you just have a general love for Sebastian Vettel.
I do, because I think that he has a love for the sport. And I really appreciate that, because you have people, and I'm not saying that Lance Stroll does not have a love for the sport. He obviously does, but I do think maybe a lot of it is his dad having money and being able to kind of run these positions. Whereas Seb doesn't have that. He just genuinely loves the sport. Like, there's a clip where he's naming all the former world champions.
Yeah.
And
How far
I think
back did he go?
All the way. Yeah, it was, I think, like Daniel Ricciardo or something, who was like, oh, Seb's probably gonna get them all. Like, he's a bit of a nerd.
I think Vettel will get those. He's a bit of a nerd.
Okay. You relate.
Yeah. 2023, 2022, 2021, Max Verstappen. '80, Alan Jones.
Yeah, that's why you love him, because I feel like you see someone you can appreciate, like, that you would appreciate in real life, in his, not only his driving skills, but also his personality that he's shown through interviews.
I just feel like he has a genuine love and care for the sport and the people around him.
I agree.
And that is something that I really appreciate about him. And I think sometimes is difficult to find in sports that are so highly competitive and so much about selfishness, to find someone who can be selfish when need be, but can also be quite selfless.
I agree. Yeah.
Who has driven for Aston Martin? Do you want to take a guess? There's only 4 drivers that have driven for Aston
Lance.
Martin. Yep.
Sebastian Vettel.
Yep.
Fernando Alonso.
Yep. It's Nico Hulkenberg.
That is random. No, that is random.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. They were doing, last year, they were doing so well at the beginning of the season. They've kind of gone downhill since then.
That's a really aggressive check mark you got there.
Yeah.
Please show the class. Share with the class.
Yeah, I just was doodling. Yeah, I wish that they had continued to be on the up, because I was starting to get really excited about them as a team potentially taking on some of the upper teams, kind of shifting around the playing field, the pack.
Yeah.
But that didn't really end up happening.
I still think they have a chance because everyone's slowly catching up, and it's 2025 where new
2026.
2026?
Yep.
Okay. Where, new rules are coming into play. So I think after that, it could be anyone's game. It really depends. Mm-hmm. I just hope they take advantage of it. I want to see them succeed, no matter who the drivers are, because I do appreciate, the team.
Yeah. Is there a reason? Do you like who runs it, or...
You think I like...
Well, I'm not talking about the owner. I'm talking about, the team principal. The vibes?
Oh my god, the vibes are immaculate, dude. I don't know.
I feel like it is that you like the drivers.
I do.
Say you had Yuki and Kevin there. Would you still like that team?
No. God, no. I have beef. Personal beef. But no. I do have my own personal, grievances with Lance Stroll and how he's conducted himself throughout the season. But I do think he has funny moments, and I do think he could be a really good driver if he really worked on some stuff.
Do you want to talk a little bit about who Lance Stroll is?
I think learning to kind of manage that and accept that, some weekends are great and others are, not as good. It's just part of what we do.
He is a talented F1 driver, and there's a reason he is in F1, and it's not just because his father is the Aston Martin owner. Yeah. Of course that plays a factor. Absolutely it plays a factor. He has a guaranteed seat if he wants one. However, I think he got there of his own accord. I don't believe that it's what everybody says of, oh, it's pay to play. It's not. He did genuinely get there.
Yeah, I agree, because the thing is, you're dealing, you can't fake driving an F1 car around the track.
Obviously,
no money can go into the actual action of what you're doing driving around that track. Yes. No one is there with you. No, money is not going to save your life if you crash into a wall. Yes. Lance Stroll is Lawrence Stroll's son, obviously. And yes, a lot of people say that he only has a position in F1 because of his dad being there. And I think that does somewhat play a factor. I think it's easier potentially for him to get a seat because of his dad, but that does not inhibit the fact that his driving is doing the talking, and right now it's not talking very well.
Oh, it's speaking so poorly of him
but he has, at least somewhat, he has earned his position to be in F1 by driving in previous, events and stuff like that. And I just don't think it's fair to put all of his success to his dad's money. Because the sport is about money. They all, or typically a lot of the drivers that are in F1, they had money growing up, because you have to have money to be able to get into the sport, to get into cars. It's just difficult if you don't. It's not impossible, but it is difficult.
I can appreciate how hard he has worked in order to get into a seat, but because his father owns a team, of course he's going to be at his father's team. Lawrence Stroll's investment in the F1 was because his son...
Oh, it absolutely... He's talked about this before. It absolutely was because of his son.
But I don't think that's an issue. I think a father being so supportive and interested in what his son is passionate in and is good at, to the point where he wants to support his son any way he can, I like that. Brownie points there. Dad points,
Yeah.
He must have had a fantastic Father's Day after that.
It's hard to make judgments on people you don't actually know. I can sit here.
I love to just absolutely make up a person in my head. I'm like, yeah, they would totally
I can
think
sit
that.
here and be like, I don't like Lawrence Stroll because of how some of the things he says or does. But the truth is, I don't know him.
Exactly, and I think that's part of why we can't make such brash, like, judgments. I think actions speak louder than words, and
Yeah.
Lance has earned his spot, and I don't
Lawrence
think...
supports his son. Lawrence Stroll is pretty interesting. He's an interesting character. He got a lot of his money from the fashion industry.
Okay.
And then he just, I guess, Lance likes F1 and he wanted to support his son in that career, so he's sort of bought stakes and things and I don't know, it's I don't really know what his like goal in doing that is other than like getting his son into it.
If you have the money,
Yeah,
I would do it too.
Yeah, but he's definitely, don't get me wrong, he's definitely a supportive dad, but it also, like, it does feel a bit performative sometimes when I see them interact.
I mean, to an extent, everything is kind of a publicity stunt when it comes to, well, specifically, I think of Charles and Carlos.
Yes.
Because I don't think anyone would say they're particularly best friends off the track, but kind of portrayed as such.
Yeah.
But I think they get along, and I think they have a good time together, but I don't think they'd choose each other outside of Formula One. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I just think
it's definitely a big marketing thing where, like, it's to have, like, a united front in the team.
Oh, yeah.
All the teams do that, and it's weird then when people try to take that and be like, but they aren't best friends off the track. It's like, I don't care. Like,
okay, and
I'm not watching it to see them be friends. I'm watching it for the cars.
This is not Formula Best Friends race. This is Formula One.
Exactly. I love watching the drivers' like dynamics and like their videos that they make, but like I'm not sitting here like they have to be best friends.
I mean, of course.
I don't feel tricked either. I feel like it's just like common sense.
Yeah, exactly. A little ridiculous that people expect like people to be so like close. Obviously they're interacting all the time, like throughout like long extended periods of time, but that doesn't mean like they have to be best. I'm gonna hold your hand when I say this. They do not have to be best friends.
Yeah.
And I think, of course, part of the draw to the sport is the fact that these are individual drivers and you can obviously have your favorites and why. But when it boils down to it, the sport is about the cars. It's not about the drivers.
It is about the drivers, but it's not about the drivers' interactions with each other.
Correct.
So Lawrence Stroll is just this Canadian billionaire who keeps buying teams and his son drives for his teams. And it's just a real interesting dynamic going on. And he's a real interesting guy. They portray him really weirdly on Drive to Survive. Like they make him like this like almighty like symbol guy. It kind of makes me uncomfortable.
That would make me uncomfortable too.
Like people are always trying to be on his good side and like all these things, and I get it. It just feels really performative and weird, and it just, I don't always like it.
The vibes, bro, they're off.
What does the future hold for Aston Martin? I don't know right now. I actually think that's a bit of a difficult statement to say because I think that there's a possibility that they could be on the up if they get certain upgrades to their car, if they have, their mechanics doing things that they need, if they are able to, they just re-signed Fernando Alonso, so if he's able to continue doing well, then it should be good for them. But they haven't been performing the best these past few weekends, and I just don't know if that's a little bit of like a slump thing or if that's going to continue.
I agree. I feel like the slump thing is very accurate for a lot of drivers right now. Like we see how Checo's performing or...
Yeah. Unfortunately with that too is a lot of the sport is like, it's the concept of you're only as good as your last race. And I think that that's sometimes not fair, but it is really how it's viewed.
For me personally, I'm glad I'm not really in any kind of Formula One space. I like to form my own opinions about the different drivers, their driving styles, kind of their careers as a whole. I just can't agree with the sentiment that the last race defines like how you are, because I feel like so many people are disregarded because of that, but they're talented. There's a reason they're in Formula One.
I know that the concept of that is because you have team principals and people who are looking to like re-sign people, and they're like, oh, they're not doing well, so we can't hire them, and they're ignoring maybe some past achievements that they have. Unfortunately, it does, boil down to that. If they're not performing, it doesn't seem as if they're going to continue doing well, then they do have to think about that when they're re-signing drivers.
Absolutely, and I think they should take into account their most recent races, but it shouldn't just boil down to the previous race. And I don't think that the drivers, because of course they're all listening right now, this kind of goes for everything. You can't just focus on the last thing you did, because let's say I play golf, so what I always had to focus on for golf was my last shot. It may have been horrible. Just 1 kilobyte of data. It's thousands of swings you're going to make in just one day. Well, hopefully not thousands. It's thousands of swings you're going to make throughout your life. And obviously these people race outside of just these races. They race in qualifying, their home simulators. They do these things for a living. So they're going to have so many more opportunities to improve on what they're doing. And they need to learn from their mistakes rather than internalize them and obsessively think about them.
Yeah. It is important to have a healthy mindset when you're an athlete at that high of a level.
Oh my God, yeah.
It's really difficult, and you have so much pressure on you. So to be able to not internalize those mistakes and be able to keep pushing forward is a huge, huge thing. That was something that I was not able to do with soccer.
It took me a long time to be able to do that with golf. At the beginning, I didn't have a very healthy mindset when it came to it. And that's the whole reason why I quit competitively. I made it to a very, high level, but because I was competing.
So much pressure.
Yes.
It is. And if we feel that, I can't even imagine the amount of pressure that they feel with the entire world watching them.
Absolutely.
It's a lot. It really is.
I was in a tournament for about 2 years that if you shot over, I think, an 85, you were kicked out. You were just straight up not allowed to come back.
Awesome.
So it did improve my game. I did, achieve scratch golf.
Yeah.
However,
but
was that horrible for my mental health? Absolutely.
As a kid, as a teenager, to have that sort of pressure on you, it feels like the end of the world.
Yes.
When you don't do that, you don't realize that sport that you're playing is not everything that you are.
Yes, and I think a lot of value that they are ascribed in the Formula One sport, it is absolutely, it's black and white, and it's never, let's take into account all that they've accomplished this season or in the past seasons. It's very much, how'd they do last race?
Yeah, and it's weird too because they're racing from such a young age that then by the time they retire, they still have their whole life ahead of them. And I do think it's sort of the feeling of, what am I going to do now? Because a lot of them go back to the sport, or they continue somehow, like Martin Brundle continues to be a commentator for the sport. It's all they've ever known. Yeah. It's hard to kind of get out of that and then go and have a different life.
I think it can be hard to kind of have your own personal identity when it's so intertwined with something you've done.
Especially when the public wants you to have that identity.
Exactly. I've known people... I've known people who have done a sport all of their life, and when they quit, they're like, what do I do now? And you have been one of the people that has successfully kind of pivoted to different passions in your life.
Now I went back to sports.
Whoops. It takes time, but I think they need to give themselves that time in order to move away and kind of figure out who they are by themselves.
Yeah, I agree.
Personal advice for the F1 drivers.
Yes.
And kind of just anyone who has been so intertwined with something. It doesn't have to be a sport either. It can just be something you've done all your life where... I lost it.
No, I can see where you were going with that. That makes sense. No. Where if you're so intertwined with something, it's not your only identity.
Yeah.
You can do other things. You can have separate interests.
Exactly. People are multifaceted, and I think
it's weird to hold people to one thing.
Yeah, limiting people is not normal.
Yeah.
Don't do it to F1 drivers.
So Fernando Alonso re-signed with Aston Martin through the 2026 season. And he's also talked about potentially being some sort of I don't really know, manager, member of the team throughout that, like afterwards. I don't know if that means as a driver or in some other facet. It will be interesting to see how he does it. It'll be interesting to see if they re-sign Lance Stroll. He hasn't been performing well, but I still can't imagine that they won't. It will be kind of a shock if they don't sign him, I think.
The future,